Hey, what's going on, guys? So today we're talking about the best-selling cards under $5 or less. Yu-Gi-Oh! Penny Stock, Market Watch, Nibiru, Judgment, Ash, Parallel Exceed. We've seen these before, but let's take a look at Judgment real quick. Judgment is interesting. I've been running Judgment in a lot of my decks. Evenly is really popular right now. Lightning Storm is really popular right now. Harpies is always going to be popular. Raigeki at 3 is pretty crazy. Dark Ruler No More is still a really popular card. And at the end of the day, this card just says no. On top of that, this card can negate summons. On top of that, this card is always live. So as long as this card, because this card was at, I believe, 1 or 0. I believe it was banned for a while. Then it was at 1, I believe, for a while. And it's been at 3 for a good amount of time now at this point. But when we look at Solemn Judgment, all versions of Solemn Judgment are above $5. I know this one says it's got a listing as low as $4.80. It's probably like damaged or something like that. Actually, no, that listing is actually just gone. It hasn't been, the page hasn't been updated. So the only listing currently for Solemn Judgment, and I mean, obviously the Metal Raiders version, it has no listings at all. But there's just, that's insane. The 25th anniversary, the pre-sale, maybe it just hasn't hit yet. Probably just hasn't hit yet. So that would be interesting. But when we take a look, you know, we have 3, 6. By the way, this ghost rare, it looks really cool. But 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. Currently on the market, soon to be 19. And of the 19, 1 is under $5. It says 19 results, so I actually didn't even have to do all the counting. But it makes me feel better when I count. So when we take a look at this card, we do see 66 here from Total Rock Gaming at $3.95. That is maybe a bit of a deterrent, thinking that maybe the market could hold at $4 for a while. But I don't see it getting any lower. This card, I don't see this card going anywhere. The only thing that could affect this card is if it gets hit by the ban list. But I think that it's just not a good enough card, I don't think, to get hit by the ban list. Like, there are definitely times, it was like the Mystic Mine situation, right, where everybody was like, draw the out for Mystic Mine, and whenever you drew the out, they just so happened to have the Solemn Judgment set. It's just, it is what it is. But at the end of the day, this is a fantastic buy. This is a fantastic card. And if you're not running Solemn Judgment in your deck or your side deck, definitely consider it. I'll say that. You know, you do whatever it is that you want to do when it comes to deck building. But Solemn Judgment is a really fantastic card. And this is the cheapest version. And there's no coincidence. Like if you look at a card like Ash, Ash also has a bunch of listings. Ash has, it's up here, 10 listings, right? But even Ash isn't as pricey, right, as Solemn Judgment. I guess to an extent, some of them kind of are, some of them kind of not. Ash has more common printings, I believe, than Solemn Judgment. I don't even know if Solemn Judgment has a common printing. Ulti, Super, Gold, Ultra Secret, Ultra Common from Structure Deck, Lost Sanctuary. Oh, that makes sense. Actually, that Structure Deck would have that. So one common print. This is probably why most of the Solemn Judgments are a bit pricier. Lord of Heavenly Prison is still doing its thing. It's a little strange because Labyrinth doesn't really want to run this card. It's a bit bricky. And Traptrix has sort of their own version of this, where like it's just, this card's really good at protection and it's a free body, right? So the best 2 stun decks aren't running this card. So it's actually kind of interesting to see that this is still one of the best selling cards in Yu-Gi-Oh, yeah, I mean, okay, so I think, I mean, we have a regional qualifier from the 8th of March, which I don't think was main decking this card, though. Yeah, it had one copy of it in the side deck. So I don't think this is that great of a buy. This card just, unfortunately, there's not a deck that can really abuse it. So I think this is a bad buy right now. But if we do see this card dip back down to that $2-3 mark, we could be in a position to where it's all of a sudden is a good buy. Goodbye. But especially because it's a secret and a prismatic secret, right? So even that in and of itself is going to keep the price at a relatively decent spot. So it's not the worst buy on the planet, but the reason I don't like it is just because at this current time, one, it's going up in value, but two, it's not going up in play. I think maybe some people are just getting it just to play test it, just to see what it looks like in their decks. But I don't think that people are legitimately running this card to actually play this card, right? It's a good card, but not like a great card. It's that type of thing. And that's a big distinction that I think a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh players miss, is that there will be a lot of cards in their deck that are good, but not like so good that it's basically broken, right? Like, we take a look at a card like Small World, for example. In some decks, Small World is insane, but in other decks, Small World is just okay. And you're really looking for a card that's going to be like super awesome broken in your 40 card deck. Obviously, there's going to be situations where you kind of have to run bad cards, but even like Labyrinth has other cards, right? Like, Labyrinth has cards that are relatively cheap too, relatively budget, but they just never see play. Like Labyrinth Chad Wrangler, or Cuckoo Clock, right? Or Stovey Torby, Archfiend, Fair Welcome. Like, those cards, and they're probably not that bad, right? Like, what's this card say? When process attack, while you control the fiend, target one card in the field, negate the attack, and if you destroy the targeted card. Then you can set a non-Labyrinth normal trap for your hand or deck. That's actually, the second effect's pretty cool. Being able to, it's like kind of like a Sakuretsu armor. And it's a Sakuretsu armor where you get to choose what you get to pop, right? And then you can set like a D barrier, evenly matched. Like, you can set a lot of different things with that secondary effect, right? But because it's on attack declaration, it can be popped before it even can be able. Before it even has a chance to be activated, and that in and of itself takes it from being a great card to just being a good card, right? And that's kind of the difference. That's why you don't see that card in play. So Lord of the Heavenly Prison is definitely a good card, but is it a great card? I don't think so. And the fact that it's going up in value, that is a bit concerning to me. But if you guys can get this card at like $3 or less, I definitely think it's a buy. I'm not saying it's a bad buy because it's a terrible card. I'm saying it's a bad buy because it's going up in value, and I don't really see the reason for that. I mean, Gold Prime, we know these. The Gate Guardians, we know these. Haven't checked this out in a while. And some of these guys just got a reprint. Let's take a look at Kaijus. I actually don't know if I've ever featured Kaijus on this channel. But there is definitely a market. It's not only a market for them, but if you know, it's that type of thing. Now to go and explain it, it's kind of weird. Like, okay, here's what I'm trying to explain. Because I'm having a tough time explaining it because it's kind of a weird concept that you just know if you've messed around with a lot of decks, right? If you've messed around with Bee Troopers, if you've messed around with dinosaurs, if you've messed around with Cyber Dragon, if you've messed around with Thunder Dragon, I run this card in Battery Man, right? You know, Dark decks, love this card, right? That's what I'm talking about. Like, it's not like a lot of times when people see kaijus, they just think they're just monsters to give to your opponent to get rid of, you know, your opponent's big boss monster, right? To get rid of their Baron, to get rid of, I don't know, their M-Pen or whatever, to get rid of something crazy on your opponent's side of the board, right? You know, the Kashtira big boss monster, Lastria, Shangri-La, whatever his card's name is, right? But it's not just that. Like, there are other really good uses of these cards in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! And that's what makes the price of these cards fluctuate. Obviously, too, the fact that Gamma Seal has 2200 attack, it has always made it the most popular kaiju, which is why it's reprint and Dual Devastator, which is what brought us to these kaijus. The reason I'm explaining all this is because when it comes down to whether or not you want to invest in kaijus, and you have to decide which kaijus to invest in, it's not just its attack is lower, its attack is higher. It's not just it's all of its stats, attributes, what, you know, essentially what the card is, like what it really brings to the table. Like, there was a point where I don't even see this kaiju, where this kaiju was super popular because, one, the reprint for the Traptrick Structure deck hadn't come out yet, and two, and more importantly, you know, there were people summoning out Stormwinds with the Smirnoff Link monster. I think I said that card right. The Smirnoff Link monster, right? Floanderies. You would side this against Floanderies as well, which is obviously a more recent example of the exact same card being utilized, right? Like I said before, Cyber Dragon uses this card because even though this card has 3300 attack, they can just very easily get rid of it by contact fusing. So when we look at what kaijus could be really good right now, I'm definitely looking at the insect kaijus. The insect deck, which I just got my stuff from Photon Hypernova, so I'm going to start playtesting with the deck. So you should see a deck profile, ideally before the end of April. It just depends on how I'm feeling with it. Just because I'm not taking these decks to events, I'm not just going to, like, put some cards together and throw them out to the universe. I'm definitely going to, like, take some time to play test against different decks, different strategies, before I actually just, like, hey, what's going on, guys? This is my deck profile. But from playtesting with the insect deck before, playtesting it with the new Photon Hypernova stuff, seeing what the deck can do with what it has right now, it is very, very close. And Kumongous, as well as Gandharla, but more Kumongous because Kumongous just has less attack. Kumongous is also an Earth, and sometimes, like, you can run Gigagants, if I said that right, or like the Vernus stuff. The Vernus insect deck, I've definitely run some Vernus stuff before, and so obviously because it's an Earth versus Gandharla being on Wind, that makes it a little bit more relevant. It's just all based on what's meta and what could potentially be used. Like when Allure is really popular, right? Don't be surprised if Raiden starts to sneak up. So it's just all very interesting. The kaiju market, I don't have near enough time to talk about every interaction that every single one of these cards have. But when you're evaluating what kaijus you want to get, and obviously the one, like I said, that brought us here is the Dual Devastator version, the Sea Turtle Kaiju Gamma Seal. When you are evaluating which ones you want to get, don't just look at attack and defense. Look at what type it is. Look at the attribute. Look at the level. And I know that might sound elementary and obvious, but it really is very important. Like, for example, in the bug deck, if you're playing against Kashtira, you wouldn't want to give them Kumongous. You'd rather give them Gandharla, right? Why? Because Humongous is a 7, Godarla is an 8, and all the cash tiers are 7s, right? That's an interaction you gotta think of as well. What can they do with this card if I give it to like Sword Soul, for example? If you give Sword Soul, I think all the kaijus are pretty safe against Sword Soul. If you give Sword Soul, but even if you give Sword Soul like the big kaiju, like a big kaiju with a lot of attack, you could be in a dangerous spot. They do run level 10s. It's not really super easy for them to get out. I don't think they're running like a level 11, or like even a 12. I'm not really quite sure what happens. I don't know how they would be able to get rid of a kaiju for Sword Soul. And that could be right there a reason to run kaijus against Sword Soul. Also keep in mind too that like against Sprite, and I know Sprite lost Elf, but Sprite still kind of runs around every now and again. When you give your opponent a kaiju, they can't really. There are some cards that I believe there's some cards that need a level 2 or link to a rank 2 type monster, right? So when we look at kaijus, which ones to invest in, which ones to buy, I don't have time to dive into all of them, but if I had to just pick 3 consistently, Doggeran, Gameciel, and Humongous are the most popular, with the reasons for that being Doggeran's a dinosaur, so it could be searched off soul-eating Oviraptor. Gameciel's got the least amount of attack, and Humongous has the second least amount of attack. Also, when we look at kaijus, I don't really know what this deck looks like per se. I know, like, I played with the Gradle kaiju deck. Oh, Relinquished is interesting. Crusadia for sure. BES. I don't know. I mean, I guess. But when you're talking about running like Slumber, Files, Waterfront, Remove Brainwashing, oh, that's a cool looking playmat actually. This isn't like my playmat. That's just I just think it's cool. But when we look at those cards like that, like Waterfront, Slumber's a really good card, by the way. It's a dark hole that also searches. But anyway, Waterfront or like Files or any card that's got kaiju counters on it, that is something that all of a sudden you need to think of as well, because that's usually when we think of whether or not a monster is good or not, we think of the monster's effect. We don't think of its stats, attributes, and levels, right? But when we look at kaijus, they actually do have effects, and that is another reason why, at least in my opinion, why those 3 kaijus, Doggeran, Humongous, I haven't read Doggeran in a minute, and Gameciel. Yeah, you're okay. I thought so. So Doggeran is a Raigeki. Humongous, I believe, is a Royal Oppression. No, okay, not nearly as good. So lose 1 turn, or Summon Sickness, I guess. Yeah, Summon Sickness for sure. And Gameciel is an Omni Negation, but it's like what's the why am I having a Macabre where it banishes the card, right? So that's another reason why those are the popular kaijus, because their effects are actually also the best. So that's just Kaiju 101 with Hot Dog Flexor. I think all of them are great buys, and I think all of them are terrible buys. Unfortunately, that's the best advice I can give you. I think Gameciel is going to consistently be the best kaiju. I think Gameciel is going to consistently be the best buy. Is it a good buy right now? I would say so. But because of the way that this is the wildest thing too, and this is a good thing to end on when it comes to kaijus, the way decks have been transitioning as of late, a lot of decks don't really care about their normal summon. So we see like Lava Golem and Winged Dragon of Raw Sphere mode has started to become super duper popular. And that's kind of made kaijus a little bit cheaper, which isn't too bad. More of the same. This card has made its way back, which is interesting. This card, we talked about this card when it was like here, because it hasn't been around for a while, right? And so we talked about this card like right when it was here, and it started to dip. It got as low as 222, and then recently people started to pick it back up. Now I'm not quite sure why. Good. I guess Labyrinth. I mean, I wouldn't. There's nothing against, and maybe you guys are from South America that's watching this video, but nothing against South America. I wouldn't take a deck list from South America. Like it's. I'm not trying to be mean, but objectively speaking, like for the TCG, there are parts of Europe that are pretty big. That's kind of it. And then, like, obviously America. And usually, like, the Southwest United States, the Midwest to Northeast United States are usually the big ones. But honestly, anywhere in the United States. But nonetheless, as we look to see what... so it was main decking 3 copies of this card. And I will say, it does trigger the Labyrinth stuff, right? So it does do some things. And Trap Tricks can run this card as well. I don't know if they would, though. But what's interesting about this card... Well, it's a couple of things. One, the Book of Eclipse effect, right? So changes many monsters on the field, face down, defense position. Then if either player controls a face-up monster, they must send all face-up monsters they control to the graveyard. So it's actually also a way to get rid of link monsters as well. So there's a lot that this card can do. I don't remember what I said about this card before. But I do still think it's not that great of a card, because I'm pretty sure that was my original opinion on this card, is it's not that great, simply because it's a trap. It randomly peaked when Labyrinth was doing super well. I believe that's what made this peak happen in February. I'm not really entirely sure what this is all about, because that deck list that we just saw was from March. I don't know. Maybe it's fun for casual players. I'm not sure. But like I always say, this is a good thing to always bring up. Spend your money how you feel. If you bought this card against what I told you to do and sold it, bought it at $4, 6 months ago, however long ago it was when we were talking about this card, and sold it at $6, you bought it for $4, good job. But if you just bought it at $6 and you were looking for someone to say that it was a good buy, I don't really see it ever getting to that spot. Because all that's going to happen is it's going to get a reprint in the tens. That's all that's really going to happen. But let me know what you guys think. What are the best selling cards under $5 or less that you guys are looking for? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you guys click that like button to show your support for the channel. Subscribe for even more content. And most importantly of all, have a good day.